then you're in the right place. This is the Rutherford Magazine Show with host Mike Sparks. He and guest are here to talk local politics, history, faith, and freedom.
All right, you're listening to Rutherford Magazine Show. I'm your host, Mike Sparks. I've got a very special guest that I think happens to love my bumper music, don't you, Brian? Dr. Brian Terry, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Also got Jeremy Smithson, a recent MTSU graduate. How you doing, Jeremy?
Can't complain. Doing great.
I know they recognize you at church. You feel special?
I mean, it's whatever. I just stood up there,
awesome.
just stood up there really awkward, like just looking around.
And then we've got Dalton Barrett. Hadn't seen Dalton in a good while. Dalton, how you doing as producer?
I'm here. I'm here, Mike.
Do you miss us?
Not really. Not really. But Jackson's on vacation, so I'm hopping in to fill in.
Now, give us an update on what you're doing now.
So I am the student pastor over at New Vision's Buchanan campus. So
Right.
that is that's my role now.
Yeah.
So
Good.
I'll be at church bright and early in the morning for Vacation Bible School.
Good for you, man. You're touching them young lives, boy. We need it. We had it's associate pastor Clayton. What's Clayton's last name?
Easter. It's Easter.
Easter.
The O is silent.
Oh,
pretty much.
okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They had it up there.
Yeah.
They were making fun of it. Okay, like
Yeah.
Oster or something. Man, he gave a great discussion today at church. You know what?
Did he?
Yeah. Weren't you listening? If you were there.
Was it during like Sunday school or something? Because I was not there.
No.
I was actually coming in.
No, during church.
I remember Clayton's sermon, and then when did Colton start talking about his
I
thing?
said Clayton, didn't I? Clayton.
Clayton, the big old boy?
Yeah.
Him. Yeah, I know. I was listening to that one.
How
yeah.
big a fella is he?
He's,
What do you think he weighs?
well, he's not here to defend it, so I'm not going to make an estimate.
280.
Probably, maybe.
Yeah. He's had double knee replacements.
Yeah.
Bless those knees, hearts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
he gave a great discussion,
Yeah,
though, man.
I've
about
noticed like he's like sort of like walking around, limping around. I was like, he
knee
must have had some.
replacements, yeah. But I really like what he said, man.
I like his message. His message.
Well, he
was
talked
really good.
about young people today and the graduates, and it was kind of depressing. He's like, look, life's going to get hard. I mean, now you got to start paying bills. You're going to have student debt. And talked about work ethic, and he really bragged on Chick-fil-A. You know, I've only been in Chick-fil-A one time. Only one time been in Chick-fil-A. But he was talking about, I liked what he said about Chick-fil-A. He said they got rules that said don't go in there in the place area with a drink. And he goes in with his kids with a drink, and he spilled the drink everywhere, and he had to go get the guy, and he broke the rules. But he liked the manager's response. So the manager getting upset, he said, look, I'm just glad you're here at Chick-fil-A rather than McDonald's, you know.
Yeah.
And the guy had a different paradigm, but it was really neat how he talked about reaching the young people. And if you see folks, like you, Jeremy, or Dalton doing a good job, we need to encourage young people, especially with work ethic. Because, Brian and I were just talking earlier because he said, well, what do you want to talk about? And I gave him 30-minute notice to come up here, didn't I? 30-minute notice.
Like that.
And tell what I said we want to talk about.
Just
You don't want to say that, do you?
whatever I want to talk about. I guess.
said we're going to talk about Pride Month. He goes, what? And I was like, no, we're going to talk about Humility Month. And,
Yeah, there we go.
Anyway, Dalton, we need to have a Humility Month. What do you think? Let's start a Humility Month.
I think you just do it every day.
You know what I mean?
Take it a day at a time. And,
Just Humility Day.
do it every day yourself.
Man, that's a sermon right there.
Oh yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Just
There are some things in life where I'm just like doing something, and then reality just comes and smacks me upside the face. I was like, okay, all right.
Humility
I'm
month.
back down to earth.
What do you think, Dr. Terry?
Yeah, I think that'd be good. I mean, just stay humble.
Could have our own clothing line. Indoctrinate young people at 2 years old. Be humble and kind.
Well,
That's a Tim McGraw song.
Is it?
Always stay humble and kind. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's the book? Everything you need to know you learned in kindergarten.
Yes.
So be
Yes.
kind to others and
Amen.
Share
Yep.
things and.
Well, my wife had me help at church with the toddlers, and my wife's natural when it comes to these kids, man. And it's like I appreciate Dalton and others that are reaching these young people. And I think there was 3 young boys and 4 little girls, and and they doing the little videos and talking about Jesus, talking about things that Jesus would be talking about today, and it talked about that, being kind to others. And if these kids aren't in church, where else are they going to learn this? I mean, hopefully their parents and grandparents are teaching them. But anyways, let's just, maybe we call it a humility month, humility day. But anyways, I wanted to get Brian up here. And Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
We were talking earlier about, I asked about your mother. Your mother's in Oklahoma. You're from Oklahoma. And how old is your mom?
She is 85.
85, and slowing down, had some health issues.
Yeah, she's, and this is a warning to all those out there, don't smoke.
Yes.
Yeah, she smoked for a significant portion of her life. She has end-stage COPD. She's been on oxygen for probably 20 some odd years.
Wow.
She's also going through some dementia-like changes as well. So both those things are very tough on families and on individuals, and so she's going through that right now. She's been in and out of the hospital. We got her we've got her out of the hospital, and she's trying to get her over the hump and see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Well, you had talked about maybe bringing her here to Murfreesboro, hadn't you?
Yeah, that's something that we've tried for years to get her out here. You know, she said she's like an old oak tree. She's got roots in Oklahoma. She won't come here.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've made those attempts. And now at her stage, you know, just the travel would be real difficult to do. And
you mentioned even the ambulance trip.
Yeah, I mean, it's very expensive. There are folks that do mobile transfers for health, but it's very expensive to do those type of things. And then, you know, we'd have to move her things. But it's you know, it's easier. You know, I've got a sister there, and so it's easier for me to get out there when I can, as opposed to, you know, her.
But you're going all the time though.
Yeah, aren't you? I've been there. I guess I was there last weekend. I was there Mother's Day, and
you were telling me about the flight. You need to get a flight, and how much was it going to be?
Oh my goodness, yeah. So my mom got admitted into the hospital, and so I was trying to figure out if there's a way for me to get out there, and it was during the Taylor Swift concert, and there were actually no flights anywhere out there. And then as it was going into, I guess, Mother's Day weekend, there was one flight out on American. And it was $3,500.
Wow, man, that's sad.
So I drove.
Yeah, that is sad.
So I got to see West Tennessee and Arkansas, and there's some places there. That I think it's Van Buren, Arkansas. I stopped off on the way back. I would not recommend making that your pit stop, because there's like one road, and actually I stopped. There's a place in Oklahoma and actually in Texas as well called Brahms. It's a ice cream and hamburger store, and it's got the best hamburgers, and I always go there when I go back. And so I'm driving back from Oklahoma to Tennessee, and I want to time my drive so that I can get a Brahms on the way home, and I stopped off in Sallisaw, Oklahoma, and the line was way too long. And I guess this is something that we may segue into, but you know, just people not being able to get staffed for whatever, you know, for working conditions. And so I got back on the highway, drove into Arkansas, got off on Van Buren. I think it's just like a one exit. And whoever did their city or town design, it was like forever to get back on. I mean, it was gridlock just to get back on the road. And then once I got back on 40, you know, there was a tractor trailer actually the first thing was a house had got on fire on the side of the road, so it made it one lane. And then once you got past that one lane on 40, just a little bit further, there was a tractor trailer that had gone off the road, and so it came back to one lane. So that giant iced tea that I got in Van Buren was calling at me after that deadlock there.
You know, I told you my father was from Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and I hadn't been to Oklahoma since my aunt, who was, I think I shared this story. She was Indian. She was married to my late uncle, and she was Indian. And you know, you and I have talked about some of this, and I'll openly share this on the radio. You know, me and my father had a really tough relationship. He was World War II, and one night I had a dream, and in the dream I was at a funeral, and I didn't know anybody at the funeral. And I've got 3 sisters, well, 2 stepsisters, so there'd be 5 sisters. And I told my sister who happened to be staying with us, I had a dream, you and me are at a funeral, and we didn't know anybody, or I didn't know anybody at this funeral. So it was really odd. And she said, well, was it Dad's funeral? I said, no, because he was getting in bad health. And I said, no, it wasn't Dad. It was just a funeral you and I were at, and we didn't know anybody. And so it was about 5 days later, my aunt, who was Indian, had passed away. So we went to the funeral, and me and my dad really wasn't speaking, just drove out there and back. And it was so cool because we were at the funeral in Oklahoma, and it was mainly Indians, and they were singing Amazing Grace in native language. And my sister turned to me, she said, is this your dream? And I was like, oh, I forgot about the dream. I said, no, it was the graveside service. And I think you believe in dreams. I mean, I do. I think it's biblical, but it was really neat to listen to, because my dad had a lot of respect for all the relatives that he knew from her, had a lot of respect for her. But that's the last time I've been out there, and I guess I was probably about 32 years old. We had to go out there for that funeral. Now you were born in what part of Oklahoma?
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. And what? Now you all are Choctaw.
Choctaw.
Okay. Tell us a bit about the other tribes that's out there in that area.
Well, that was Oklahoma was Indian territory, and it's they usually had the 5 civilized tribes is what they called it. Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Seminole, and Cherokee. And it's was Oklahoma split up that way. Southeast Oklahoma, Durant, that area, that's where the Choctaws were. We have some Indian land.
So they were like assigned there.
Yeah.
After during the Trail of Tears, I guess.
Yeah, and then there were reservations, I guess, down in that area. And then I think it was the late 1880s, somewhere along those, the Dawes Act, where they ended up splitting that up, and that's where a lot of Native Americans got what called their Dawes roll numbers. And so I have both I guess it was my great grandfather and great grandmother's Dawes roll numbers going back that far. And so that's something that, at least from a Choctaw standpoint, it used to be that if you proved that, like say my mom was a member of the Choctaw, and then I just proved through birth certificate and death certificate or something along those lines, I would be able to be a member, a recognized member of the tribe. Now, if you want to claim any sort of membership, you have to prove it through birth certificates or death certificates all the way back to the Dawes roll numbers.
And how much portion do you have to be?
I think for Choctaws, I think it's at 1/16.
Really?
And some tribes are different. There's multiple federally recognized tribes, and all have different how they recognize, how much they will recognize for there to be a member.
Yeah. I think we've got a caller. Caller, go ahead. Caller, go ahead. We've got Richard Archie with Tennessee Firearms Association should be calling in here in just a few. Richard, you there?
Here.
Hey, brother, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing good. How's your daughter doing? Last time you're telling me you're all the way out there in Jackson. You've got your daughter you care for pretty much full time, don't you?
Well, she's bedbound. She has a bad kidney disease that resulted in the loss of the use of her legs.
Yes.
And so she is bedbound now. She's a fighter. She's still working full time from home.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And but I mean, she has to go to dialysis with a ambulance to pick her up.
I'm sorry.
And bring her back in, and she's not ambulatory at all. She has to be cared for in the bed.
Yeah.
And she can't get up and get to the bathroom or to the kitchen or anything like that.
How often does she have to go dialysis?
3 times a week, 5 hours at a time.
Yeah.
What?
So it is a testimony to her desire to live.
Yeah, that's. I was going to Brian Terry just chiming in. I was just going to make a comment on that. work ethic and somebody in that situation, not only to fight from their condition, but to still work from home and do that. That's a testimony to her and what she's doing. So,
amen. Well, how do you hold up, Richard? How do you hold up through all that?
Well, between that and working full time and other advocacy that I do requires quite a bit of effort and stuff. I spent quite a bit of time today putting together a new video.
Yeah.
And I am not, well, let's just say I'm challenged on those things.
Yes.
I'm not well educated on the things that I'm doing, but it's getting better. I'm learning how to do these things. It is necessary, I think.
Yeah.
Everybody knows, I believe, that I'm the West Tennessee director of the Tennessee Firearms Association.
Yes.
And so, therefore, my advocacy is for the Second Amendment. And it is something that I see people shooting at all the time, pun intended right there.
Yes.
And so I'm doing everything that I can to make sure that my daughters and my granddaughters and my grandson are as well situated as my grandfather, the old Marine, left me. He told me that was my job, to make sure that I left my progeny as well situated as I could. And so I take that seriously.
Yeah. Well, I know you do. You were telling me the other day when you and I talked about coming up on the show, it was hard for you to get all the way from Jackson up here, especially with your family situation. But you were in, what county was it? You said you'd already, was it 4 hours you'd made a trip and back?
Yeah, I drove over to Lawrence County and addressed their reconstituted Republican Party the other night. And I'm scheduled up in another week and a half to go over 3 weeks to go to Giles County. I have been to Houston County, and I'm headed over to Benton County Tuesday night to do that. So I've had a number of different Republican parties ask me to come over and talk to them about this situation with red flag laws and the Second Amendment and where we are in Tennessee and why we don't have the rights that we should. And so that's what I do is I get out and talk about this stuff, and then I don't give opinions. I just go ahead and spout the facts from the Constitution and from the SCOTUS rulings, which if, in fact, everybody listened to those, we'd have a much easier time getting back to where we need to be.
Yes. Speaking of Houston County, I believe that's Aaron, Tennessee, isn't it?
That is correct.
Jay Reedy. I know that Marty Luffman and my pastor, Brother Hazard, and my church, Parkway Baptist, a couple of years ago, we hosted y'all came in, and I don't know if you made it. I know John was there at my church. Jay drove all the way down from Houston County. He had a couple of pieces of legislation on the Second Amendment, and but I was always appreciative for y'all to come in, and we talked about the importance of the Second Amendment, and then talked about also the importance of the First Amendment to talk about the Second Amendment. I've often said the First Amendment's under attack with the woke cancel culture, the thought police, the speech police, and I've watched that they're on patrol for sure. I know we've got the special session that the governor has proposed. Y'all are adamant against any red flag laws. You and I talked the other day about the laws that's already on the books. Can you explain to listeners about y'all's position and why you feel that the laws are already there to safeguard folks that are dealing with mental health issues, but also allow the constitutional protection that our forefathers created in the Second Amendment?
Well, I think it is necessary first that we understand the latest ruling from the Supreme Court, which is the New York State Rifle and Pistol Club, Inc. v. Bruin, that was decided last June. And what that case was about, the narrow limits that the case was decided on, was the fact that New York State has a rule that says you had to prove need before you could get a handgun carry permit. And what it boiled down to was the fact that the only people that got them were politicians and actors and actresses and folks that had a lot of money. The average Joe out here on the sidewalk, when he went to seek permission, you had to show special purpose. They said, no, we just don't think you need that whatsoever. And so New York State Rifle and Pistol Club sued the state of New York, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in New York State Rifle and Pistol Club's favor. And they said that their stricture on the ability of an individual to perfect a permit was unconstitutional across the board. But the interesting thing about all of it was what they said in the rulings. And they went back and talked about Heller first off. They said, we've tried to tell you people since 2008 in the Heller decision that the only thing that you can use for scrutiny on the Second Amendment is whatever was in place at the time of the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And so, therefore, if in fact the text and history is what Scalia called for in Heller, then we're going to reiterate it at this time and say once more, it is necessary that you understand if it was not a law that was on the books at the time of the ratification, you cannot use it for scrutiny with respect to the Second or now the 14th Amendment, because in 2010, the Supreme Court incorporated the Second Amendment against the states through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which makes it, in essence, a civil right. Now, my proof for that is the case that we just had in Tennessee where our new Attorney General, General Scrimeti, agreed with the plaintiffs in a case called Beeler v. Jeff Long, where Firearms Policy Coalition came in the state of Tennessee and sued the state and said that the state had been guilty of a federal civil rights violation with respect to 18-year-olds' ability to carry a handgun for self-defense or to perfect a permit to do so. And Attorney General's committee looked at that and he said, I'm not going to defend the state against that because they're correct. Under the Bruin decision, what we have to do is go back and look at the historical tradition of the United States across the board. And at the time of the founding, the age that was set for people to be involved in the militia was at least 18, and in Tennessee at that time it was 16. But what it boils down to is if, in fact, your constitutional rights vest when you're 18 years old, you're able to vote, you're able to sign contracts, you are required by law to sign up for the draft if you're a male. You can get married, you can enter contracts, you can do all those things without parental consent. You are, in fact, an adult. And if the state can force you to carry a firearm in defense of the state, it must allow you to carry a firearm for self-defense.
Yeah.
If you go back and read what they said in Heller, they quoted St. George Tucker from the Blackstone commentaries where he said that self-defense is the true palladium of liberty. And it's been that way since day one. And they also said in Heller that the Second Amendment did not give a right to the people. It simply enshrined it in the Constitution. It was a pre-existing right for everyone to have prior to the founding of this nation. And with all those things, you go back to what Bruin said, now you have to look at what was on the books at the time of the founding. I can't find anything that shows a red flag law at the time of the founding of the United States or the state of Tennessee. Can you?
No. Let me ask you, Richard, with we're talking Richard Archie, Tennessee Firearm Association. Richard, on this special session, I always try to keep an open mind on everything, and I think Dr. Terry does too. I think pretty much every lawmaker, or at least I hope they do, listens to everyone. Do you feel, and I probably shouldn't share this online, or on the radio, but I will, but do you feel like maybe the governor is so close to this issue? Because my understanding, the substitute teacher there, and I hope I have this right, Miss Cynthia Peak, isn't she a personal friend with Maria Lee? And I think they were going to have dinner like the next night. I mean, I've kind of wondered if this is just so, his heart is just in this, wanting to do something. Have you thought about that? Have you ever heard any discussions about that?
I've tried to reach into my mind. I look back at the letter that Bill Lee sent to TFA in 2018 when he was running for governor. And as you're well aware, we send out a survey every year.
Sir.
Very few people fill it out. But he didn't fill it out, but he sent us a letter back in. And what he said in that letter was that he wanted to be sure that we knew he was the sole candidate that had made the statement in a forum in Nashville where he spoke the unpopular, politically incorrect statement that we must not use our young persons to try to take away constitutional rights. Now, that's on paper with his signature. Of course, that's in 2018 when he was vying to be governor at that point. And there are a lot of other promises he made in that letter, like I'm going to do true constitutional carry. I'm going to let teachers be armed so that they're part of the security. We want to make sure that everybody that's got a handgun carry permit gets to carry on every campus in Tennessee of secondary schools or colleges, I mean. And so all these things that he said, none of them have come to fruition. And so it makes me wonder if that's just pure electioneering on his part. But when you vouch it and you look at exactly what he said, which it's not hard to do. Anybody wants to see the letter, I've got it. They can have it.
Yeah.
What we've got to figure out is to whether he meant that at that time or what was it that changed it. But it doesn't make any difference what you personally feel. You take an oath. Every person in the state of Tennessee that is a public official that's taxpayer paid takes an oath. It requires that in Article 10, Section 2. And it says that you have to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Tennessee. And then you look at what the governor's job is. If you look at Article 3, Section 10, it says he's supposed to faithfully enforce the laws. Now, what he doesn't get to do is make them. You're a legislator.
Yes.
That's your job.
Yes.
And then after you pass the bill, he can either concur with his signature, let it lay on the table and become a law, or he can veto it.
Yes. Well, our forefathers.
Job.
Yeah, I think you would agree, and as well as Dr. Brian Terry, that our forefathers were brilliant. They were brilliant when they put together the Constitution. They put together checks and balances in place for a time such as this. I do think, and I think you would agree, because you and I talked about the mental health. There is a mental health crisis going on. I mean, you talk to any teacher, you talk to folks in the ER. I think I shared with you, we've got that, what we call the psych bed legislation, Senator Shane Reeves and I, and we had met with Lou Caputo with Stonecrest Medical Center. And they may not want me sharing this on the radio, but hey, I'm just being transparent. And we were there with Secretary of State, Trey Hargett and I, and it was around October, and Lou told me, he said, Mike, he says, man, we added 16 beds at the ER. He said, and every one of them were full. I guess they were added about 5 years ago. He said, every one of them full. He said, most of them is mental health. And they had a patient that I won't go into detail. They had a patient on the top floor that was extremely, extremely, extremely disruptive and violent. And he said, Mike, we don't have nowhere to go. We're at a crossroads here. And I call these synchronicities God wink moments. It was probably 2 months later I get asked to run this bill, which I think would offer relief, which would help the hospitals. We face pushback from the psych hospitals, Trust Point, Rolling Hills, and others, and they moved the legislation next year. It passed the Senate 9-0, and I would come out straight out of health and went straight to was fixed to go to the floor, and it got held up on our side. We've been pitching this to the governor and my safe storage of firearms bill, and I've said to our leadership, you can't name another bill that I bet's been introduced this year that TFA, NRA, and what's the group? Is it Moms Demand Action? That all of y'all would probably stand at a press conference and be for this bill, and then the Senate for some reason dropped the ball on this bill. It's the safe storage firearms, which is the tax exemption. I wanted Mark Brassfield, the owner of the Nashville Safe House, to call in. Mark had already had prior plans. And Mark's sales went through the roof after we implemented this. So it's a carrot on the stick approach to encourage people to lock up firearms. A lot of the violence we're seeing in Nashville, I bet if you go back and look at that cop that was shot day before yesterday, I bet it was a stolen gun that shot him. So these are areas that we agree on. So even if it was these two bills that got passed, or I think the safe storage firearms, we'll meet with the governor next month on it. I think it'll pass. Shane's willing to carry it. But those are areas at least we agree on.
I'm concerned about when they're talking about safe storage of guns, because I've seen another Democrat-sponsored bill that has that same moniker on it, and it talks about the fact that we're not going to let you leave a firearm in your car. Unless it's affixed in a separate metal container which is bolted to the frame of your car. And if anybody's looked at any of the new cars, there ain't no place to bolt a metal frame to a car. The whole point of it is, if you didn't make us leave them in our cars, we wouldn't have to leave them in our cars. We could take them with us.
Hey, Richard, this is Dr. Brian Terry. And to that point, let me ask you this and your opinion on this, because you bring up a great point. One is voluntary, where there's incentive. There's not a tax on storage units, whether it's the small storage for handguns, or you have the larger safes for your rifles and your long guns and all that, versus some of these Democrat bills or some of these lead bills that are require you to put a firearm in a safe that decreases your response time. Go into that a little bit.
Well, here's my thought. If I look at the statute that we have in Tennessee about self-defense, 3911-611, it tells me 5 places that I don't have to even consider whether the individual who is approaching me, if I am a reasonable person, would consider that he's facing serious physical harm or death. You don't have to ask them what they're doing. In those places, we call that the castle law in Tennessee.
Correct.
Your home is your castle. Your car is your castle. Now, why does the government get to come in and tell me what I must do in my castle? That's my problem with that. If you have a gun locked up in a safe in a house, I'm smart enough to understand that the average crime takes about 35 to 40 seconds to occur. All right. The response time, 911, across the state averages about 14 minutes. And if we look at the Covenant situation, my hat's off to those guys. They got there quick.
Yeah,
but in 14 minutes, 6 people were dead.
Yeah.
And if a person is accosting you in your home, if there's a home invasion, and you've got to go unlock a safe, I'm sorry, but you're going to be a statistic. You're a victim at that point.
Yeah.
I grew up, I don't know how y'all did, but when I was a kid, my father ran a 20,000 count layer house out in back. We raised and fed chickens. They're the nastiest animals in the world. I eat them all the time now.
Yeah.
But what we did was we kept a double barrel shotgun set beside the door in case the fox tried to get into the house out there. We could hear him squawking. It was that close. And as children, we were told that was a tool, just like his good chopping axe or his crosscut saw. You don't touch those things. And so, therefore, we had that shotgun loaded, set behind the door every day. And if something occurred that was going to cost us money or harm us, it didn't take us getting into a safe to get our hands on something that was necessary. It's a tool, and it is your absolute constitutional right, and it pre-existed this. Our Creator gave us the right to self-defense. If it is, in fact, the true palladium, then why is government coming to try and tell me that what I need to do is put a stretcher or a lockbox or something on it to make it harder for me to get to, something that I have an innate ability through God to own and to use? That's my thought on it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you've got agreement, and there's a lot of agreement up at the Capitol with you on that. But yeah, that's the distinct contrast between some of those bills that are out there, some people that float those, versus the bill that Mike's got, where it's voluntary, and I think that's something, if you incentivize people that they, if they may want to, potentially have a handgun somewhere that, to fight off an intruder, versus they may want to put their long guns up or however. I think the incentive is good in that respect, but the overreach from the government is not.
Yeah. If you go back to the Heller decision and hear what Scalia said about self-defense being the true palladium of liberty, he goes further and he describes the uses for self-defense. And he says an individual may use a firearm to stand off a criminal, either in his home or outside his home. He can also use that same firearm in case of invasion. I was in a committee meeting this year where they were actually running House Bill 1005 by Grills. And a legislator said, why, you don't ever use those weapons. The militia's never used. Why, in the War of 1812, There was no militia whatsoever involved in that, and I nearly fell out of my chair. Because if you know anything about Tennessee history, you understand Coffee and Carroll and Jackson and all the guys that were involved in that were every one militia. There was no standing army whatsoever at that point. And so the people that left Tennessee, Willie Blunt, who was the provisional governor, stood on the courthouse steps there in Nashville and asked for 2,500 volunteers, and 5,000 showed up to go down into Alabama to fight the Red Sticks at Horseshoe Bend. And at that point, they turned around and marched from Pensacola, Florida, at that point to New Orleans to face the British coming in. And the 5,000 people that we had, 2,500 under each Coffee and Carroll, who were probably some of the finest soldiers ever. And Colonel Jackson at that point had them as his main commanders, withstood 15,000 of the finest British regulars that had just finished defeating Napoleon. They put them on a ship and ran them over here, and they were going to subdivide the United States and take us back over. And people from Tennessee with their private weapons, by the way, they walked down there by themselves. They defeated them, and they stood up for the Republic. And for a man in a position of a legislator to say out loud that there was no militia involved in the War of 1812 is inexcusable.
Yes. Richard, I'm sitting looking at a news report. This is off Chicago Sun-Times. This was over Memorial Day weekend. This was about Chicago, 12 killed, 48 wounded in Memorial Day weekend violence in Chicago. Chicago has some of the toughest laws, and then it goes on to say that the gun violence was the worst since 71 people were shot during the 2016 holiday weekend. You know, I know that the governor, you know, I don't think there's much support there. The speaker has said that, you know, and it's going to be tough. But I know that y'all are for this safe storage of firearms bill that we've got. I'm hoping he passes this, or with his help, we pass this indefinitely, where it's sales tax free for forever. And you know, obviously the fiscal note gets higher with that, and that's why that threshold is a little harder to get passed with the fiscal implication. But
give all that away to the Titans.
What's that? Say again.
Good bills.
Say again, Richard.
I said maybe if they didn't give away all that money to the Titans, they'd have enough.
Well, that's a good thing. I didn't vote for Titan Stadium.
I didn't either.
I didn't either. I mean, good point. You know, and but I'm always reminded of that quote. I've always liked that quote from the movie Cool Hand Luke, where he's, you know, the quote, Brian.
I'm listening.
I mean, what we've got here is a failure to communicate.
Yeah.
And one thing that I like about you, Richard, you know, you always come by. You're strong in your opinion, but you're a good communicator to meet with everyone. And I think we all have to have the discussion. I think especially in the areas of mental health. I mean, we're seeing it. You know, like I say, I've seen it personally at Stonecrest with these young people. We're seeing the suicide rate increase, and it's really sad the times that we are in. I think one area that you know, the TFA and NRA and even Moms Demand Action can find common ground, and that's one of the ladies that came up and met me. I forgot what group they're in. They were the ones that hold up the signs. Do you know the name of it? I can't. They had the little literature. Anyways, they're really nice. They come by my office.
Yeah, I know.
But that was one of their key points, was safe storage of firearms. And you know, maybe I can get y'all involved on this mental health piece of legislation. You know,
we've got some of the best involuntary committals laws in the nation. 33,
36,
402, and 404.
Yeah.
And basically what it boils down to, any person who sees another individual that they perceive to be a danger to themselves or the general public can contact law enforcement. At that point, law enforcement is required then to do an investigation. And so then they go out and they access that person, talk to them, and we'll do it. Feel that it is warranted, they can take them into custody involuntarily for 48 hours. And they can put them in a place where they can be assessed. And at that point, if the medical professionals doing this and not deputies, by the way.
Yes.
Hey,
You put them in there.
Yeah. Hey, Richard, let me talk to you a little bit about that, because that's you bring up a great point. I think it's a lot of it's the lack of awareness that I think that's out there. Maybe it's messaging or what, but it's 33.6, 401, 402, 43, that section, a lot of Title 33, and then there's also, I think, Title 9, 16, 5, 17, dealing with threats of mass violence. But, we have, and that's one of the things that we have a mobile mental crisis unit that people just don't know about. And, it can be activated by 988. We have 911, and now we have 988. And I think that's one of the things that they have transitioned, and I think they weren't quite sure that they could handle the load. But this past year, I think they've had 70,000 calls to 988.
Wow.
28,000 of those on the spot received what's called a first certificate of need for involuntary admission. And that's, we have, what you're talking about, 33.6, you have involuntary evaluation, there's an involuntary admission, and then there's involuntary committal.
Correct.
And so the involuntary there are four types of individuals that can detain somebody. You have police officers, or you have law enforcement. You have physicians. You have psychologists, or you have professionals that the Commissioner of Health has deemed that could do that. And so that's where if somebody is they have to either have a known mental illness or a serious emotional disturbance and be a threat to themselves or others, and you can detain somebody for an evaluation. They can get that first CON, then they go to the hospital for that, and that's where the physician determines whether or not they need a second CON for admission, and then they have that involuntary admission process. And at that point in time, they're admitted to a hospital. They're away from weapons. And it's not just firearms. They're away from any sort of weapon, whether it's driving a car through a parade. I'm from Oklahoma City. In the Oklahoma City bombing, I was there when that occurred. It was a bomb. It wasn't a firearm. And so you have that process, and then through that, there is a legal process by where they can be involuntarily committed. But there was 28,000 first CONs. Of those, 16,000, I think, received a second CON, which they were involuntarily admitted. And I think of those 16,000, 8,000 were admitted involuntarily because of mental. Not all those are going to be, necessarily violent or anything like that, those committals. But we have a process in place, and I think there are some things that we could potentially do to improve the awareness, improve the process by which we do that, and you're actually getting somebody mental health treatment, or somebody that's in a crisis. That's one of the issues that we have in Mike's bill, dealing with the beds and availability. We have 4 state hospitals and 26 other mental health hospitals, so we got 30 in the state, but not all of them can be staffed. And here in Rutherford County, we have Trust Point. They have 210 beds or so.
Staffing is an issue.
And they have maybe they can staff 150, 165 beds per day. And that's one of the issues that we have is we have it not only just a mental health crisis, we have a staffing crisis.
Sure we do.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are some things I think that we can improve on that aren't red flag laws at all. I mean, look at 33.16, 517. It says if you communicate mass violence towards a school, I think it's a misdemeanor, but it's just towards a school. I mean, maybe we can expand that to more than just a school threat of mass violence, and then. And there's due process that way, but there's some things that I think.
See, there's the key.
Yeah.
Right there, Doc. The whole point of the matter is in that involuntary committal, after you spend that once you get committed for observation, before they can go ahead and put you in, you get to bring an attorney. You get to mount a defense, and you get to tell your side of the story. So it's not the fact that your high school girlfriend who's mad at you because you broke up with her can call in, and they come and get your guns at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and here's something else that a lot of people don't realize. We have a statewide, it's a crisis intervention training for law enforcement, but it's through grants, I think federal grants, and only about a third of the counties use that. But law enforcement officers, for all that they do, they don't diagnose mental illness.
Exactly.
I mean, they may be able to determine whether somebody's, immediately risk to somebody, but if you have to hit those two prongs of known mental illness or serious emotional disturbance and a threat to others, how do they do that diagnosis? They can't. And so
they can't.
So
what I saw in the governor's bill, it was left to law enforcement. And that's one of the things that we're really seriously concerned about.
Yeah,
they got enough on them right now.
Yeah, I think we can improve the crisis intervention training. I think there's some things that we can do, and that obviously would take funding to do that. But again, they don't do the diagnosis.
Richard, and I've
I
said all along it needs to be medical professionals doing that. That's one of the things we're pushing for, because we have those laws on the books now.
Yes. Richard, I've been, you've probably heard me share on the House floor, encouraging lawmakers, both Democrat, Republican, to go through, whether it's THP Academy or the local Sheriff's Academy, their local police academy. I've done some ride-alongs, and I've been with them when they've come up on a mental health situation, and they try to be prepared, and they're, the state's done a better job of training. There's been, I think there was $1 million added in the budget. Was it last year or year before, Brian? For the intervention training, and Kim Rush was in my office early this year discussing. She's one of the folks that helped with the training. But that's one area that I think, like Dr. Brian Terry says, we need more discussion, because if you go through their academy, you listen to what those officers, even the sheriff, is saying, they're not equipped with this. Our ERs aren't equipped. We're going to have to start bringing back some mental health facilities.
Sure.
And some folks are whether it's drugs, or they're going to have to get the treatment. We're going to have to spend the money.
Well, and the thing that really stands out, when you talk about 70,000 calls,
yeah.
I mean, that tells you that, it's not just the calls. How do you put, teach students or teach children or adults, to understand their mental issues or the stress that's going on with them, to put them in a situation to where they're not in a crisis.
Yeah.
And those are some of the things that I think need to be talked about, is how do we as a society do a better job of getting people out of a crisis, or not even into a crisis.
Yes. Well, Richard, I'm going to give you last word. We're going to go to a commercial break, and I got my buddy Marty Luff. I'm going to call in. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, the one thing that I would say, I'm watching all of the lower court cases that have happened since Bruin, and this one I think was the most instructive. It's United States v. Harrison from Oklahoma, by the way, in February of 2023.
Yeah.
And what they said in this case is no longer should lower courts evaluating firearms restrictions defer to the determinations of legislators, because while that judicial deference to legislative interest balancing is understandable and elsewhere appropriate, it is not the defense that the Constitution demands. And while end justifies the means, rationalizations should generally be understood as antithetical to the rule of law, Bruin now leaves no doubt that such rationalizations have no place in our Second Amendment jurisprudence.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Richard, for calling in. And I guess we'll be seeing you in the next few weeks in the Tennessee General Assembly regarding a special session. Also want to get you to come by. We're talking about putting a little event together at Marty Luffman's house with Mark Brassfield, talk about safe storage, and have you, maybe John as well. I'll be reaching out to you the next few days. We'll take a quick break. Thank you so much, Richard.
Yes, sir.
We'll be right back.
Bye-bye.
Most people know that their insurance can provide them with coverage for the many life's mishaps. But I can help you also unlock discounts, save money, and get benefits with Farmers Insurance Policy Perks. Whether we're discussing home or auto insurance, I am here to help you understand these great perks. Call me, Mark Lewis, at 615-625-7070 for a quote, and you can get a whole lot of something with Farmers Policy Perks.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Not available in every state. Only available at select Farmers branded policies underwritten by Farmers Truck or Fire Insurance Exchanges or affiliates.
My wife and I enjoy going by Yard Sale Inc. We usually go to both locations, the one in Smyrna as well as the one in Murfreesboro. A lot of times on Saturday mornings we stop by, and their inventory changes weekly, so you never know what you're going to see, and it's mostly open box. The name fits it. It's exactly that. It's a yard sale. If you don't totally agree with the price, the staff is always friendly and nice and willing to work with you.
That's the Yard Sale store in Smyrna at 111 Enon Springs Road West, in Murfreesboro at 204 South Front Street, and online at bestdealintown.com. Dr. Automotive Auto Repair and Maintenance Mechanic Shop Garage provides car owners in Smyrna, Murfreesboro, Laverne, and the Middle Tennessee area with excellent auto repair services. Deep-rooted experience in serving both foreign and domestic automobiles allows for proper diagnosis in a timely manner. Check them out online at autorepairsmyrna.com, call them at 615-220-0971, or stop on in at 1205 Hazelwood Drive in Smyrna.
AFFI is Middle Tennessee's premier choice for pest, wildlife, and moisture control. They specialize in those difficult and unique cases. You can reach them by phone at 615-300-2395. That's 615-300-2395. Or stop in at 200 Glenrose Lane in Smyrna.
All right, we're back. I want to hit Brian up. You ever been to the yard sale?
To the yard sale?
This yard sale store.
No, I have. Oh, here on.
Yeah,
no, I have not.
Man, if you hadn't been there, folks, you hadn't been to the yard sale. Man, you need to go over there. He hooked his brother up on some hardwood flooring a year and a half ago. I mean, he's just, if you need a deal on refrigerator, mattresses, whatever, swing by there. You never know what Sean has got over at the yard sale. You know, they're at the old Crowley Supply store in Smyrna now. Huge facility now. I think we've got a caller. Caller, go ahead.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, thanks for calling in, brother. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. Doing real good till Richard brought up about the Titans Stadium taking all that money.
Oh, do you wish we would have voted for that?
Yeah. No, I'm really enjoying the show tonight. Richard's a wealth of knowledge. Dr. Brian Terry, of course, is a wealth of knowledge. And
yes.
They do great things for the state of Tennessee.
Hey, did you hear me? Did you? You know, we you and I talked about inviting Mark Brassfield. Mark's game. I mean, he said he'll do whatever. Maybe doing something at your place. I know you just renovated your porch and had some work done and a new deck and all installed back there. Maybe we get. Well, you help orchestrate the event that we had Tennessee Firearms at Parkway Baptist Church, talking about the importance of the Second Amendment. Let me know what night would work good for you, and try to get Richard out, or maybe John and both of them, and Mark Brassfield over at your place.
Okay, yeah, I will do that. I'd love that. I'd enjoy the heck out of that.
Well, you know, you've done some shooting, and I did you hear what I put on about you on Facebook?
Yeah,
I put,
Mike, I'm gonna get you for
self-proclaimed sharpshooter, whatever it was I said. But now, what's your thoughts on, you know, firearms? You've been around firearms all your life. You've probably got more firearms at your house than anybody I've ever seen, even my late father. But what Richard said held true to me, because I'd go see my dad on the weekends, and he'd have a gun sitting there, and he just instilled in my head. I mean, I never touched them. You know, I never touched them, and I just knew better. But I mean, the sad thing is we've got folks breaking into cars, and they are touching them. They're stealing them, and it's happening as an epidemic. And that's probably why that guy was shot and killed the other day, was looking for guns in cars and trucks. Go ahead, Jeremy. Jeremy wants to say something.
We've got an epidemic of break-ins going right now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Mr. Luffman, this is Jeremy Smith, and actually, just to weigh in on some of the break-ins, where I work, the Smyrna Golf Course, there have been 2 in the past week or so. And one of them, the gentleman had a gun in his car, and it got stolen. So
that's what they're looking for.
Yep.
You know, and Mark at the Nashville Safe House, they sell, you know, gun safes for vehicles. You can go to Amazon, eBay, and not just Nashville Safe House. But I do think it's something we need to take seriously as a society. When are you going to put your next pistol shoot together?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
I had one this afternoon.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to get you in trouble or anything.
I had people just show up and say, y'all want to shoot?
Well, didn't you have a city councilman trying to enact some type of new ordinance in Davis County?
Oh, man, I tell you what. They in Metro government, some guy complained to his councilman that it was too noisy with all the shooting going on. Now, this was in the opposite side, north of Nashville, where the councilman sent a bill in front of Metro Council that if you lived within 500 feet of another person, you couldn't shoot a gun.
Oh. Well, you don't. Well, you've got your neighbor to the right, but other than that, you're pretty secluded.
I don't have any neighbors, and the only neighbors that I do have, really, we've all got gun ranges in the back.
Yeah, because behind your house, I can see some hills. That's Williamson County, correct?
Nope, that's mine.
Well, you on the hills too?
I'm on a hill looking back at a hill.
Oh, you own back to the hill. Okay, all right. Because I can see some hills. I thought it was like Concord Road, Knoxville Road, Williamson County.
No, my farm goes back. It's narrow, but it goes back deep into the woods. What you're seeing when you're sitting on the deck looking back there, that's my farm.
Well, speaking of self-defense in those areas, you had an altercation. What was it? 3 or 4 years ago? There was some escaped. Not escape, but some folks on the loose, I guess, and you held them at gunpoint, didn't you?
Well, I didn't pull my gun on them, but I did hold my hand on my gun in the holster.
Yeah.
But no, they were gang members, and they had broken into a bunch of cars, and the police were chasing them, and their car broke down, and they were looking for a place to hide, so they ran up my driveway and went into the barn and was hiding out in the barn. So I went down there and told them, come on out. Well, they were going to run out the backside and keep on going. And I screamed at them. There's copperheads everywhere back there.
Yeah.
Then they came back up the driveway, and I laid them down on the driveway. And then it wasn't but a minute later, I heard this voice. It was a man's voice behind me said, don't shoot.
Oh, it was Metro?
I thought, oh, man, I have let somebody come up behind me. And he said, don't shoot. And I saw my peripheral vision. It was Metro policeman. I said, what are you doing here? I ain't called any police yet. He said, well, we've been looking for these guys. He said, you caught them. And he said, I'm proud for you, but he said, you got to watch your back because they're gang members.
Oh.
I just to change the topic here, I just got some news that came to me that is quite stunning. And Representative Bill Beck, who came in with me in won his election in 2014, apparently has passed away.
Oh, really?
And he's legislator out of Nashville. I think he actually he had has the district that has the Titans.
Yeah.
And that he was an attorney, and
he passed.
That's what I'm getting.
Wow.
Getting texts and all these messages about
Bill's
him.
a nice guy.
Bill was
he's always
good dude. We always may not have always agreed on stuff, but he was always respectful.
Yes,
and good dude.
Bill's just a man. How old is he?
Says he was 61 as apparent heart attack.
Man, you just never know. You never know about life, and he's always treated me good. Well, most folks at the Capitol are good folks. You know, he's a Democrat attorney, but a nice guy.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think. You see the hate that's out there from
the media,
mainly, and just a lot of people on social media, this, that, and the other, and most everybody up there, you're friends with, and you can talk to them, and you might not agree with them on issues, but this is.
Well, you know who kills my bills? Republicans. It ain't Democrat. Everybody thinks no, because we have the majority.
Yeah.
So when my bills get killed, it's not your Bo Mitchells of the world, those folks. It's Republicans, man. Just be straight honest with you. Man, I hate that.
Prayers to his family and his community, and Bill was
yes. Yeah, it's really sad, man. He's on health with you, isn't he? Wasn't he on health with you? I was thinking he was on health with you. I know he's on, I think, civil justice.
Yeah.
Marty, we'll give you the final words with the last few seconds we've got. Go ahead.
Well, I just appreciate you having shows like this. because the public needs to be much more aware of the gun laws in the state. And then we've got Governor Lee is fixing to push a bill through, or try to. I don't know that I'm all in favor of it, but I'm in favor of the majority of stuff he does.
Yeah.
We've got a good bunch of people representing us up there right now. They just need to hear from their constituents.
Yes.
But thanks for letting me go on. It's good.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk about putting that event together, because see, somebody even like Bill Beck would have showed up. I mean, Bob Freeman. Bob helped me get that safe storage bill passed. He spoke up for me, and it's really just so sad. You just never know what tomorrow's going to hold, and we need a little bit more. Like I say, let's make this Humility Month instead of Pride Month and Humility Day every day. Thank you, Dalton. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Marty. And thank you, Dr. Brian Terry, for being here with us. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye-bye.
WBTVLP Murfreesboro, W263AI Murfreesboro, W270AF Murfreesboro.
WGNS Murfreesboro. Touched by Angels, locally owned and operated in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Call Tamanika Turner